Chapter 1. You are listening at FameTV.info. I woke up from the nightmare again. Ningyu grasped the thin quilt wet with sweat tightly and sat on the bed gasping for breath. The strange picture was still shaking in my mind for a long time. That I in the dark, his eyes are bright green, and his hands are dripping with blood, like a crying sword blade. Why, it's all gone, or can't you forget it? Looking up, he sighed. In a glimpse of the remaining light, the sunlight of the morning came from the gap of the curtain. The warmth was not enough to dispel the faint coolness left by the night, but it was also bright enough. Push open the window, the beautiful morning has come, and the graceful birdsong is high and low, also telling us that it is a new day. After a simple grooming, Ningyu deliberately changed into a brand new disciple's robe, tied the sword on his back, looked in the mirror and rearranged his hair. Then he went out. Today is an important day, so he should take it seriously. Yes, today will be a good day. At least when he stepped into the hall, he still thought so. Along the way, many disciples of the sect pointed at him and blinked at him, which he didn't care about. He had been used to it for more than 10 years, however, when he came to the hall where 7 religious sects were gathered for the celebration and reward, he still noticed that the atmosphere was not right and the eyes cast around him were not good. It's not jealousy, not envy, but a kind of cold sarcasm, even ridicule and disdain. Yinshu's sword pavilion is well known. There are more than a dozen small and medium-sized empires around, and the young generation of the aristocrats are sent to join the clan for training. As one of the inner disciples, he was born in the most humble family and was always excluded. But today, that kind of day will come to an end. Ningyu thinks so these days. But why is their attitude still the same? Apart from other things, there are already people sitting on the inner door disciple's seat, which should belong to him. Elder Martial Brother Lin, are you sitting in the wrong place? Ningyu said as calmly as he could. Except for the elders of Yinshu's sword pavilion, the other 6 sects and even many empires around them sent people here. Don't be rude. Wrong seat. No, that's where I am. Elder Martial Brother Lin sneered, wiped his nose, and snorted, is it hard to do it, you bastard of the clan? Do you want to continue to sit on this seat? Scum. Ningyu's eyes changed and his tone became more gloomy. Elder Martial Brother Lin, should we pay attention to the propriety in speaking? Right. Well, it's not necessary for a scum like you. As soon as the words came out, several disciples around Elder Martial Brother Lin also responded one after another. Looking at Ningyu, his eyes were full of cold and disdain. Lin Zhong, make it clear to me. Anger a drink, rather more voice is very loud, so that a time over the whole hall of the debate all of a sudden, everyone's eyes are focused. The next moment, a bald old man in the elder's seat got up, raised his hand, and said, I'd rather go. Where is this place? How can you be arrogant here? Rather more brow slightly a wrinkly, after all still bow a hand to salute to return away. The person doesn't offend me, I don't offend. Elder Martial Brother Lin Zhong insulted me first. I'd rather say something wrong. But what's wrong? What's wrong? What a mistake. Let me ask you, what happened on the night of the 13th of last month? The elder drank coldly, and sullen eyes appeared. 13 last month. Ningyu's face suddenly changed, and a faint fear appeared in his eyes. After a flash, the memory that he wanted to avoid in the nightmare flowed in his mind again these days. 3 months ago, in the Mist Mountain range 500 miles north, a warcraft suddenly slaughtered 3 mountain villages overnight due to unknown reasons. The blood flowed everywhere and its limbs piled up like a mountain. Then he became bloodthirsty and openly attacked the imperial city. The more tenacious the guards were, the more cruel the killing was. At last, the 7 sects headed by Yinshu's sword pavilion set up an array to kill the fierce beast, but underestimated its strength. The battle was broken, hundreds of people were injured, and the fierce beast fled with injuries. After chasing for decades, several groups of elders and disciples were injured and returned without success. At last, it was he who brought back the beast's head. He was alone with a sword, his robes were ragged and stained with blood, showing the color of Yen Hong. He could not even remember how to complete the impossible task. Back to the gate of the moment, rather more faint, but laughing, this kind of credit is enough to make him proud that he will no longer be looked down upon by others in Yunshu Pavilion. Waking up from the memory, Ning was more and more surprised and said, I have told you all about everything. However, since the three elders asked again, Ning you should answer. That night, I found traces of the wounded beast. I followed him all the way. I sneaked on him when he was tired and asleep, but I failed to kill him with one sword. I fought hard in the middle of the night and finally won with half a stroke. Up to now, you are still lying here. On the other side, one of the disciples in the inner gate got up and looked angry. At the same time, he pointed to the other person on his side and said, Brother Sure is the one who killed the beast. Where are you? That night, more than 10 of our martial brothers fought hard for half a night before they got away with it. Would you rather try to win our achievements? The head of the fierce beast was brought back to the clan by me. How did it become your merit again? Ning Yu's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. However, elder martial brother Sure was always at odds with him. Unexpectedly, he was suddenly in trouble and slandered here. Suddenly, senior brother Sure also stood up, raised his trembling arm and said, Yes, you brought it back. Because after killing the fierce beast, we were all injured, leaving several people to guard the corpse. The rest scattered to find other companions, and wanted to carry the fierce beast's corpse back to the school together. But when I went back, I found that the beast had lost its head, and all the brothers died. Ningyue, you are so cruel. In order to win the credit, you can even kill your classmates. Speaking of this, he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a big mouthful of dirty blood. At the same time, he wailed, Pity my younger martial brothers. They didn't die under the fierce beast's claws, but they were killed by a mean person of yours. Sure Guanqi, don't spit about people there. It's clear that I killed the beast by myself. How can it be your credit? As for the dead martial brothers, I never saw them that night. Ningyu suddenly burst into a rage and slandered him for being greedy for work. I can't bear to slander him and injure his classmates. Besides, I was accompanied that night. Elder 3, can you ask younger martial brother Meng Yuhao to come up and answer? All of a sudden, he suddenly remembered that he had a witness. Meng Yuhao is one of the few people who can get along with him in Yunshu Sword Pavilion. He usually takes care of him himself, and their relationship is not bad. That night, rather worried that Meng Yuhao's cultivation was not enough, just let him watch, don't fight, and fight the fierce beast alone. All the process, Meng Yuhao see in the eyes, but later I do not know why he disappeared. Maybe I was worried about my own accident and went to find my brother around for help. No matter at the end of that night or now, Ningyu always thinks so. Okay, pass on Meng Yuhao. With the order of the three elders, a slightly small figure came out of the group of disciples, but he looked a little nervous. Yuhao, don't be nervous, just tell the truth. Rather more light a smile, but the smile at the corner of his mouth suddenly solidified. In a flash, an inexplicable sense of uneasiness rose in my heart. As if he was afraid of Ningyue, Meng Yuhao subconsciously stepped back a few steps, and his voice was shaking. Tell the elders that night, when elder martial brother Ning and I arrived in the valley, the fierce beast had been ambushed and killed, and there were several other martial brothers on the scene. Everyone was injured, and they were not lightly injured. Yuhao, what are you talking about? At this moment, Ningyue's look completely changed. Ningyue, shut up. The witness is here. Are you going to continue to threaten him? Sure Guanqi cold drink, and then a lot of soft voice, younger martial brother Meng, slowly say, here he can't hurt you. Meng Yuhao nodded and continued. Elder martial brother Ning, I admit that you treat me very well on weekdays. But I, Meng Yuhao, can't be ashamed of my conscience. That night, you proposed to swallow up the credit for killing the beast. We shared it equally. I and several martial brothers have advised you, but why do you want to be so crazy and kill them all? Yes, you make a sneak attack and fall into a fierce battle, but the target is not a fierce beast, but your fellow disciples, our martial brothers. Meng Yuhao, what you said is really worthy of your conscience. Ning Yue angrily drinks it. He can't believe that Meng Yuhao, who has been taken care of by his younger brother, betrays himself at this critical moment. No, it's helping people frame him. Just because I can't be sorry for my conscience, I want to say it today. My father is in poor health. My biggest purpose of becoming a disciple of Yunshu Sword Pavilion is to gain some achievements and change some miraculous medicine to nourish him. That night, you told me that as long as I gave false testimony, you would take 100-year-old snow ginseng to my father when you wanted to reward me. So, I promised you to give false testimony at the beginning. But these days, I suffer a lot. As soon as I close my eyes, I think of those martial brothers who died under your sword. So today I have to tell the truth. Meng Yuhao raised his hand and pressed it on his chest. In the presence of all the elders and brothers, I, Meng Yuhao, swear to heaven that everything I said is true. You'd rather monopolize the credit and injure your comrades for a moment, I'd rather be speechless. Death, hopelessness, itself this slander frame up suddenly, I was unprepared. What's more, the only person who can testify also took refuge in the opposite side. Ah ha 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 ha. The next moment, he raised his head and laughed, and there was a trace of scarlet blood in the tears slowly falling from the corner of his eyes. At the beginning, he did promise to give Meng Yuhao snow ginseng. Today, there are only two rewards he wants to receive in his heart. One of them is the 300-year-old snow ginseng, which is given to Meng Yuhao. In fact, it was this reward that night for fighting fierce animals. I didn't expect it to be like this. Yuhao, I have nothing to say. One side, 3 elder eyes show sullen. I see, you have no excuse to continue sophistry. Wait a minute. He has nothing to say, but I have something to say. Here, it's not anti-Haka, is it? At the banquet, one of the guests got up and arched his hand, but he came to celebrate the other 6 sects. Seeing that this man got up, Ning Yu's eyes flashed a trace of surprise. However, when he saw the figure behind him, his face suddenly changed. Maltreat an injured person. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.